The 17th century marked a pivotal era in the history of North America, witnessing the birth of English colonial ambitions on a grand scale. This period was characterized by a fervent drive for expansion, fueled by the promise of untapped resources and the allure of new territories. The English, like other European powers, were eager to stake their claim in the New World, driven by a combination of economic interests, national pride, and a desire to spread their influence across the globe. England, driven by a thirst for resources, new markets, and the desire to compete with rival European powers, embarked on a journey that would reshape the continent. The voyages across the Atlantic were perilous, fraught with dangers from treacherous seas to the unknown challenges that awaited them on distant shores. Yet, the promise of wealth and the potential for establishing a foothold in the New World spurred them on. These early explorers and settlers were not just adventurers. They were pioneers laying the groundwork for what would become a vast colonial empire. This period witnessed the establishment of 13 distinct colonies along the Atlantic seaboard, each with its own unique origins, motivations, and trajectories. These colonies were more than mere outposts. They were burgeoning societies with their own economies, governance structures, and cultural practices. The charters granted to these colonies often reflected the diverse intentions of their founders, ranging from commercial enterprises to religious havens. The diversity among the colonies would later become a defining feature of the American identity. From the fertile fields of Virginia to the rocky shores of New England, a new world was taking shape, forever altering the destinies of both colonizer and colonized. The southern colonies, with their vast plantations, became centers of agricultural production, relying heavily on the labor of enslaved Africans. In contrast, the New England colonies, with their harsh climate and rocky soil, developed a more diverse economy based on fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. These regional differences would have profound implications for the social and economic development of the colonies. The story of English colonization in the 17th century is one of immense complexity, encompassing themes of opportunity, exploitation, and cultural exchange. The settlers brought with them their customs, beliefs, and ways of life, which often clashed with those of the indigenous peoples they encountered. Trade and interaction between the settlers and Native Americans led to a blending of cultures, but also to conflict and displacement. The economic activities of the colonies, from tobacco farming to fur trading, were deeply intertwined with the global economy, linking the New World to markets in Europe and beyond. It is a story of individuals seeking wealth and freedom, of religious dissenters yearning for a place to worship according to their consciences, and of indigenous peoples confronted with the encroaching presence of European newcomers. The Puritans in New England sought to build a city upon a hill, a model of religious virtue and communal living. Meanwhile, in the mid-Atlantic colonies, a more diverse population created a melting pot of cultures and beliefs. The interactions between these groups were complex, marked by moments of cooperation and periods of intense conflict. The establishment of these colonies laid the groundwork for the eventual rise of a new nation, but not without leaving behind a legacy of conflict, displacement, and enduring social and cultural complexities. The struggles for power and control, both within the colonies and with external forces, set the stage for future conflicts. The displacement of Native American communities and the introduction of African slavery created deep-seated issues that would reverberate through American history. The social hierarchies and cultural norms established during this period would shape the emerging American society in profound ways. The English colonies can be broadly categorized into three distinct regions: the Southern colonies, the New England colonies, and the Mid-Atlantic colonies. Each of these regions developed its own unique character, influenced by a variety of factors including geography, climate, and the backgrounds of their settlers. The Southern colonies, with their warm climate and fertile soil, became heavily reliant on plantation agriculture. The New England colonies, with their colder climate and rocky terrain, focused on fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. The Mid-Atlantic colonies, with their more temperate climate and fertile land, became known for their diverse population and mixed economy. Each region developed its own unique identity, shaped by a confluence of factors including geography, climate, economic opportunities, and the motivations of its settlers. The Southern colonies' reliance on slave labor created a society deeply divided along racial lines, while the New England colony's emphasis on community and religious conformity fostered a different social structure. The mid-Atlantic colonies, with their mix of cultures and economic activities, became a microcosm of the diversity that would later define the United States. Understanding these regional differences is key to understanding the broader narrative of early American history. Understanding the distinct characteristics of each region is crucial to comprehending the broader narrative of early American history and the forces that would eventually lead to the American Revolution. The seeds of discontent sown during the colonial period, from issues of governance and representation to economic grievances, would grow into the revolutionary fervor that ultimately led to the birth of a new nation. The legacy of the 17th century colonies is a complex tapestry of ambition, conflict, and cultural exchange, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would shape the future of the United States. Central to the relationship between England and its colonies was the economic doctrine of mercantilism. This doctrine was not just a set of economic policies, but a comprehensive worldview that shaped the political and economic strategies of European powers. It was based on the belief that the wealth of a nation was finite, and that to increase its wealth, a country had to accumulate precious metals like gold and silver. This accumulation was seen as essential for national power and security. This system, prevalent in Europe during the 17th century, viewed colonies as instruments of national wealth and power. Colonies were not just territories to be governed, but were integral parts of a nation's economic engine. They were expected to supply raw materials that were scarce in the mother country, and to consume manufactured goods produced by the mother country, thus creating a closed-loop system that benefited the colonial power. Mercantilism held that a nation's prosperity was directly linked to its accumulation of gold and silver reserves, and that achieving a favorable balance of trade was paramount. This meant exporting more than importing, thereby bringing in a surplus of precious metals. The colonies were seen as vital to this process because they could provide the raw materials needed for manufacturing and serve as markets for finished goods. Colonies played a crucial role in this scheme by providing raw materials and serving as captive markets for manufactured goods produced in the mother country. Raw materials such as tobacco, timber, and furs were shipped to England, where they were turned into finished products. These products were then sold back to the colonies or to other countries, ensuring that the wealth generated from colonial resources flowed back to England. England, through a series of navigation acts and other legislation, sought to regulate colonial trade to ensure that it benefited the Crown. These laws mandated that certain goods could only be shipped to England or other English colonies, effectively monopolizing colonial trade. The Navigation Acts were designed to keep the colonies economically dependent on England and to prevent them from trading with other nations. Colonies were required to ship their raw materials, such as tobacco, timber, and furs, to England, even if more lucrative markets existed elsewhere. This restriction often meant that colonial producers had to sell their goods at lower prices than they could have obtained in a free market. The economic policies were designed to benefit English merchants and manufacturers at the expense of colonial producers. In return, they were to purchase manufactured goods exclusively from England, bolstering English industries and enriching English merchants. This arrangement ensured that the colonies remained economically dependent on England, and that the wealth generated from colonial resources and markets flowed back to the mother country. English industries thrived as they had a guaranteed market for their goods, while colonial economies were kept in a state of dependency. While mercantilism brought certain benefits to the colonies, such as protection by the Royal Navy and a guaranteed market for some of their goods, it also stifled economic diversification and fostered resentment. The Royal Navy protected colonial shipping from piracy and foreign threats, which was a significant benefit. However, the economic restrictions imposed by mercantilism limited the colonies' ability to develop their own industries and trade freely with other nations. Colonists chafed under the restrictions imposed upon them, feeling that their economic potential was being deliberately hampered for the benefit of the mother country. The resentment grew as colonists realized that their economic interests were being sacrificed to enrich English merchants and manufacturers. This discontent was not just economic, but also political. as the colonies had little say in the laws that governed their trade. This underlying tension between colonial aspirations for economic autonomy and the constraints of mercantilism would eventually contribute to the growing rift between England and its American colonies. The desire for economic freedom and the ability to trade freely with other nations became a significant factor in the colonies' push for independence. The mercantilist policies that were designed to bind the colonies to the crown ultimately sowed the seeds of rebellion and revolution. Of the region and setting the stage for centuries of racial injustice. The southern colonies' reliance on cash crops, particularly tobacco, rice, and indigo, profoundly shaped their development. These labor-intensive crops fueled the growth of a plantation economy, characterized by large landholdings and a sharp social hierarchy. Wealth and power became concentrated in the hands of a small planter elite who controlled vast tracts of land and the labor force that worked it. This reliance on cash crops also made the southern colonies heavily dependent on transatlantic trade. Tobacco, rice, and indigo were exported to England, where they were processed and sold for a handsome profit. In return, the southern colonies imported manufactured goods, luxury items, and even food from England, perpetuating their reliance on the mother country. The southern colonies, with their focus on agriculture and a social order built on racial slavery, developed a distinct identity within colonial America. The cultivation of these crops required a significant labor force, which led to the widespread use of enslaved Africans. The transatlantic slave trade became an integral part of the southern economy, with thousands of Africans being forcibly brought to the colonies to work on the plantations. This system of slavery not only provided the labor necessary for the cultivation of tobacco, rice, and indigo, but also had profound social and cultural impacts on the southern colonies. The planter elite, who owned the largest plantations, wielded immense political and economic power. They built grand homes and lived lives of relative luxury, supported by the labor of enslaved people. This created a stark contrast between the wealthy landowners and the poor, both free and enslaved, who worked the land. The social hierarchy was rigid, with little opportunity for upward mobility for the majority of the population. Moreover, the focus on cash crops meant that the southern colonies were less diversified economically compared to their northern counterparts. While the North developed a more varied economy with industry, trade, and small-scale farming, the South remained predominantly agricultural. This economic divergence would later contribute to regional tensions and conflicts within the United States. In summary, the southern colonies' reliance on tobacco, rice, and indigo not only shaped their economy, but also their social structure, culture, and relationship with England. The legacy of this period is still evident in the region's history and development.